T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
I am the tiger, dancing through the fire. I am the champion, and you're gonna hear me roar.
Okay, everyone, our music is not working this morning, so I'm going to come straight in here live, and I hope I'm on. Welcome, everyone, to Quantum Leap Your Future, here on Coach on Fire and iHeartRadio, and I hope it's an awesome day wherever you may be. I'm thrilled to have you join me here, and I look forward to spending the next 30 to 40 minutes or so with you, talking about this topic that I really enjoy talking about lately, and that's a topic of being selfish. So before we kick it off, for those who don't know me, my name is Anna Anderson, and I have been a trainer, speaker, and coach now for over 20 years. I have the awesome privilege of partnering with highly motivated entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, those who are looking to uncover that next adventure, right, that next chapter in their book, whatever it may look like, or launch that or grow that business or change a lifestyle or whatever it is, that next adventure when you're just ready to make a change. And I want to start out by sending to you all a huge welcome to Quantum Leap Your Future, coming to you today live as it does every second Friday, all the way from Nanjing, China. Now, at the moment, I am based here in China. I work with coaches, trainers, and business people from all over the world to take their life and their business to another level. And I love what I do. Along with that, I'm thrilled to be here talking to you today. So let's jump straight into it, because it's a busy day for me here today. And it's a hot day. Now, we're hitting summer, so it's a hot day here. So it's a great time to just be sitting down for you guys. Take a break, take a coffee, and sit back and listen to our show. So as I said here, the theme for our show today is, it's time to get selfish. It's time to talk about getting selfish, really looking at this word and what it means. So I want to start with a question. If you're really honest with yourself, would you call yourself a selfish person? Or do you like to be known as a selfless person? Now, most of us, I think, I put my money on it actually, would probably be uncomfortable if someone described us as selfish. It's not usually a word that we put out there as a compliment to other people. Even when we say it to ourselves, it just doesn't feel good. It brings really negative feelings to who we are and what we are. And when someone says you're being selfish, in most cases you're being criticized. Very rarely is it said as a compliment or praise. So would you say you are a selfish person? Well, actually, I believe everyone is selfish. Me, you, all of us. As humans, we are all naturally selfish. Selfishness comes from our desire to live, from our instinctive desire for self-preservation. It's part of our human nature to be selfish. If we weren't being selfish, we wouldn't look after ourselves, we wouldn't be able to live. But why then, if it's natural for us to be selfish, why is being selfish seen as such a bad thing? What if it turns out that being selfish is not such a bad thing? That being selfish, actually putting ourselves first, prioritizing our needs, may actually be good for us. It may actually be good for our health, our well-being, our professional goals, our business, our relationships, and every part of our life. So now stay with me here, because I know this is, a lot of you out there will have this feeling that, I don't agree with this. Because how do I know? Because many, when I put this post up that this was the topic of our radio show this week, many actually sent me private messages and chatted to me and says, man, I don't know if I agree with you here. I don't want to be selfish. So I want you to stay with me for the next 30 minutes and let's really look at this. Because a long time ago, I remember reading an article and it was entitled, Be Selfish. Be very selfish. I don't know what the article was, but I remember thinking, and I remember reading further into this article because it really piqued my interest to be selfish. My initial thoughts were no doubt exactly what you're thinking now when I say to you, be selfish. It's like, no way. That's not the answer here. Because I, like most of us, was totally attuned to that notion that being selfish is one of the worst characteristic traits that we might possess. Being selfish is immediately associated with all the negatives in life. We put it with greed and ego and arrogance and conceit and pride. The list goes on. Everything to do with selfish is negative, it's toxic, it's self-destructive. We see that people who behave selfishly on a regular basis, most people will put them out there and see them as self-centered, thoughtless, and all these negative connotations. No one likes to be around a selfish person. Selfishness is typically defined as being excessively or exclusively concerned with just yourself. Now, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I want us to really dig deeper and think about this more. Because when I was a kid, I remember, and I know if you close your eyes, you'll go back to this, all adults around you just hear it all the time. Don't be selfish, share your toys, do this for someone else, get off your seat. I know that I grew up feeling bad if I didn't share. I grew up feeling bad if I put myself first. I remember feeling bad if I wanted something just for me. And I know many of you can relate to this. I remember having, a bag of lollies and then giving it away and actually, I have none left for me. And I know that this feeling, this thought of selfishness, the way I thought about it, actually followed me through my teenage years. My grandmother's favourite saying, and I know my cousins will relate to this if they're out there listening, whenever we saw her final words to us whenever we left, and she was the most beautiful person, but her final words to us will always be a good little Christian girl, be a good girl. And it was a lot about being kind and being nice and looking after others. My whole family, this was the basis of our being, was looking after others. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with looking after others. But there was never, ever anything in my childhood or teenage years that was about looking after me, about being selfish at all and looking after me, putting me first. Even into my marriage, my business, and having my own girls and having my own family, I've always had this inner drive to put others first. It's just part of my whole being is to always think of others first. I still do. My parents came first, my marriage came first, my religion came first, my girls came first, you name it. I put everything and everybody before me. Now, don't get me wrong. I did this quite willingly, and I was quite happy to do this. I was happy doing what I was doing because basically I didn't know any better. This was what I believed was the way to do it, and I was happy doing it. I was ignorant. This is what I thought life was, basically selflessly just giving to other people. But then one day, and I'm going to say it, it was the worst day of my life. On October 8, 2002, I lost my dad. 8 weeks from diagnosis to death and 5 surgeries in between, he died from a massive brain tumour. And everything that followed, I started to become more aware of different things. I started to think of things differently. This was really a turning point for me in my life. I started looking at my dad. He died having not achieved all that he wanted to or could have achieved in his short life of 57 years. Now, don't get me wrong, he wasn't unhappy, or maybe just a little, and yet he was always pushing me and my brother to achieve more and extend our horizons and achieve more than he did. Because of his illness, or because of an illness when he was 13 years of age, my dad never finished high school. He was meant to go to St. Stephen's at that time, a real prestigious boys' boarding school. And instead he spent months in hospital. And then when he returned to our hometown to finish off his schooling, he never really got that kickstart in life that I think he always thought he would. And we never really talked about it. My dad wasn't one for idle chatter, unless he was drinking too much. So we never really learnt much about how Dad felt about that, of his education or his goals or his life choices. But what I do know is that he wanted so much more in his life. And on his death, that's when it made me reflect on his life at 57, which was way too young to die, and my life. And I knew that, like him, deep down, I wanted more from life. I wasn't unhappy. I've never ever been an unhappy person, and yet I've always wanted more. And on his dying, a huge turning point in my life and my thinking. Because for a long while, I felt guilty about having this feeling after my dad died. I had a wonderful husband, I had 2 beautiful daughters, a good business, a lovely home, lots of friends and family around, and I had just so much to be thankful for. And yet, guess what? I wanted more. And I know I felt selfish. For a long time, I felt so selfish, wanting more. So I gave more instead, and I put more and more into doing things for other people. And for a long time, I sat on this feeling. For a long time, I squashed this feeling. And I worked really hard instead on being content with what I had. But when Dad died, and through the grief and through the time that followed, that's when I decided that things needed to change. And while it didn't happen overnight, I know that this was a major breakthrough for me. The major breakthrough when I began to see that to survive and to live as I wanted, I needed to get selfish. And from there on in, I began to develop what I believed to be a much healthier mindset. I felt so much freer in my head. It was a mindset where I became more important to myself, something I don't believe now in hindsight I ever was. I began to look at the mindset that I held onto so firmly that I should always put others' interests ahead of mine, and that pursuing self-interest was totally wrong, and it wasn't right. It wasn't right. I began to see those 2 mindsets. I began to make my own choices based on, being selfish, on what I wanted. Now, I didn't go out there. I didn't have a massive, epiphany and leave my family or anything. But I did work through my own thinking, my own way of being, and who I wanted to be and how I had lived my life to that point. Even the word selfish still has really negative connotations for me. Even after all this time, 2002 till now, 15 odd years, it still has really negative connotations for me. But I decided right then and there that I was going to become selfish. I was going to start looking after me. And guess what? You have no idea the difference this made in my life. Now, I know I'm putting this out there because this is not something I generally talk about. This is not something I talk about often. And yet this part of my life, this decision of mine to make this change is a big, big part of who I am today, a big, big part of my coaching practice and the tools and what I do and how I use tools to help others in my coaching, my training, and my speaking. And so I think, I'd like to ask you, what do you think about this? What about you? Do you think being more selfish in your life could bring positives? Do you think that at some time in your life you could be proud of being selfish? I actually am now. I am proud to be selfish. I am proud to say to my family, my friends, my colleagues, my business, associates, that I am selfish. Why? Because they know I will give anything, usually to other people, but that the key for my success, the key for being who I am, is around me now, looking after me. So let's start our learning today looking at what selfishness is, because I think to truly understand that selfishness can be positive in your life, you really need to understand what selfishness is. And then I want to just talk a little bit about why I believe you need to be serious about selfishness if you want to have success. Why I believe you need to be really selfish if you want to make changes in your life. and why you need to be selfish just to be happy and create